Victoria Falls at a Healing in Africa summit. All the people here tonight are people who've been talking for the last 4 years, because I think the one good thing that happened over the last 4 years is that we found like-minded people who were solution-based. I think that there was so much fear generated during COVID, and that people who weren't afraid, which is many of us who saw early treatment protocols working, got together and we collaborated and we developed protocols. Africa's record is quite remarkable. We were predicted to have a disastrous outcome, and in fact we lost 1/500th of the people that lived in the so-called advanced countries. And you don't have to go very far here to notice that people in rural communities are exceptionally healthy, and that the more urbanized a community becomes, the more unhealthy it becomes. So lots of reasons for Victoria Falls. It is a place of healing, and spiritually people actually come here from the whole region to get water from here. And I really think that Africa could be a place of healing for a lot of people who are currently going through a lot of negative stuff, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere. So we brought together all the people that have been talking into one place, so we met each other for real instead of virtually, which is magic. They have a real presence about them, many of the people who are here. So it was really a meeting of the minds and discussing solutions going forward. Dr. Martin Wucher runs a master's degree in functional medicine, and his understanding of medicine at an absolutely biological basis is amazing.
I'm Dr. Martin Wucher from Namibia. We've come through 4 years of a lot of stress, of a lot of trauma, and we've had societies being split into different groups. And I'm part and parcel of a group in Southern Africa that have looked at this whole lot and tried to find new ways forward. And the first thing is to basically get together as a group, share many of our experiences, come out and say, this has worked in the past and this hasn't worked in the past. And I think our workshop or summit, we've called it Healing in Africa Summit, is a reflection on what we see every day in Africa. And it's very interesting. Because we've got the old environments with the old traditions. You don't see obese people. You don't have chronic disease. And then next to it, in our bigger centers, we've got westernized modern living environments with a high level of metabolic disease. On top of that, in the last 4 years, we've got an increased disease burden from whatever COVID did to us. And it's the whole spectrum. And then on top of it, you could say the tip of the iceberg is the increase in cancer. How do we deal with it? What can we learn from Africa? And how can we employ it in a manner that will help and support, number one, doctors who want to investigate those techniques and knowledge, and also patients and families.
We've got some real out-the-box thinking doctors here, and we're going to be discussing the puzzle of health. How do we develop a proactive rather than a reactive approach, which is what integrative medicine and functional medicine is about. Zimbabwe is unusual, a bit like Zanzibar. Our constitution protects natural healing. And so it's a perfect place to meet and discuss how we can go forward with natural therapies that make a difference going forward. I think it's the first of many. This is like the debut event. This is the experiment. And we've got some amazing people who've attended. So it's going to be an exciting few days.
I cannot put in words what we have done. It could be because English is not my mother tongue, but I cannot put it in words in Spanish either. Because we think we didn't do anything extraordinary. We just did what we had to do, nothing else. This has been a war, a real war. And in a war, you're obliged to participate. We are supposed to work for the people's well-being, for the people's health, to heal the people, and nothing else.
My name is Dr. Shankara Chetty. I'm a natural science biologist and a general medical practitioner. I've ran a practice for over 2 decades now in Port Edward, South Africa. I was a frontline COVID doctor at the start of the pandemic. I pitched a tent outside my home and started seeing COVID patients, trying to figure out what was going on. And I found a route to the pathophysiology of COVID, which informed my treatment strategies. And so I started to treat COVID patients early on in the pandemic. That understanding made me controversial because of the vaccine and the understanding around the vaccine.
My name is Susan Vosloo. I am a cardiothoracic surgeon based in Cape Town. My interest is surgery for patients that are born with congenital heart disease and transplantation. In my practice, I do the whole spectrum of cardiac surgery. I'm very privileged to have attended the meeting of Healing in Africa. I do believe that many solutions come out of Africa.
I'm Herman Edeling. I'm a neurosurgeon from Johannesburg. I stopped operating years ago and I conduct a medico-legal neurosurgical practice. It was a marvelous experience to meet what feel like old friends and being able to see them face to face in the same room.
I'm Dr. Tina Pears and I work in the UK. I have a particular interest in a condition called mast cell activation syndrome. And so I see a lot of patients with long COVID and the vaccine injured. I've come here because this is the most fascinating summit I've ever been invited to.
Many of the people here today are highly recognized in their communities, in their peer groups, but unfortunately, they've been hammered and sidelined in the last 4 years.
Many of us are facing disciplinary action from our healthcare regulatory bodies. A very important figure from the time of 2020 onwards is Jackie Stone, who's had a very tough time facing persecution from the authorities.
I think that the doctors and allied health professionals that have joined the summit have one thing in common. We look at our profession as healers, not as doctors. And I think we all have the same critical thinking skills, that we are individuals, we treat our patients as individuals. And so I think that's what brought us into this arena of going against what a common narrative has been over the past 4 years. And that's made us brothers and sisters in arms.
A lot of it revolves around fundamental ethics, constitutional laws that we've had for hundreds of years. And we will focus on what is sensible, what is right, and what we can do to go forward.
Part of what we're also looking at is how do we form a group that can go forward and really help other doctors who face a similar sort of experience in the future.
My name is Hector Carvalho. I'm a medical doctor. I was born in and raised and still live in Argentina. But actually, I'm not in Argentina. I'm in the channel in the middle of the Zambezi River. And that side over there is the Republic of Zambia. And behind you, it's Zimbabwe. I appeared here a day ago, and I was invited to participate in a medical meeting because, as the record shows, together with Dr. Hirsch from Argentina, we were the first ones who performed studies on ivermectin for COVID-19. That was in April 2020, giving us the honor of being the first ones in the world to initiate, finish, and publish these studies. And this can be easily proved if anyone wants to reread the National Library of Medicine, because it's all there in black and white. And maybe that's the reason I am in the Zambezi River. We found out there are so many things, good things that could be done here and that would be proper and good for the people living here, that we offered ourselves to collaborate.
My name is David Klatzo. I've been a private forensic scientist for 40 years. And I've been involved with many of the cases that were quite high profile over those years. My chief claim to fame is that I seem to have annoyed both sets of government equally, so I must be doing something right. We've moved out of Enlightenment values into an authoritarian-based way of living. And that is exceptionally dangerous because it gives people with money and power the opportunity to control your life, my life, and everybody else's life, not necessarily for the better. And the pandemic is a good example of probably what I would call genocidal behavior on the part of the authoritarians. And I'm hoping that this conference will be a nucleus for change. And change has got to start somewhere. And it may well be that this is a good place for it to change.
I'm Dr. Emma Briley. I'm a British GP. I've been qualified 30 years and I've worked in general practice for 24 years now. I'm really happy to be here in Victoria Falls, and we share a common interest in a more functional approach to health, and where we've really got to as a world community with healthcare, what challenges we are facing moving forward and what lessons we can learn from Africa.
Somehow, if one looks at healthcare in the world, those countries, like specifically the US, with the biggest health budgets and the largest number of healthcare professionals, have the worst health outcomes possible. For instance, the chronic disease in adults affect over 60% of the population and over 40% of children. This is not seen in Africa. Africans are far more healthy, and we do have a lot to learn from the continent. We are privileged to be living on a continent like this, and particularly in times like we've had for the last 5 years.
The central thing is this: since the declaration of the COVID-19 pandemic, governments and the international regulatory authorities violated all the ethical rules. Not only that, they violated the human rights protected in the South African Constitution. They developed a new speak similar to what George Orwell predicted, where words were given new meanings. They did gaslighting, where things that are reality were denied, where things were claimed to be real when they were not real. This, together with a fear narrative that had been rammed down the world population's throat since early 2020, has resulted in confusion and fear.
The pandemic was a very unusual situation that we hadn't encountered before. and the way of dealing with it was way beyond our experience. We experience a lot of fear as medical practitioners and amongst our patients and communities. And we then went into a very unusual situation, which was the entire lockdown of a population, something which was a very great surprise to me at the time, because I immediately recognized the harms that was going to cause. And that was something that very quickly, from a medical point of view, became obvious. And the repercussions of that we are still feeling within our society.
The people who came together here are adults who think for themselves. And they are adults who've had the courage to stand up in public and state who they are, what they know, what they believe. So this was a summit of healthcare practitioners who believe in science, true science, the scientific method, and who believe in ethics, and who do not bow down to authority, especially when it's irrational, and especially when we can see that it's wrong.
I think what we need to remember is that medical ethics are very old, and they've thrived for a long time because they're so important. And indeed, they were highlighted after Nuremberg. And when we're faced with a crisis, a medical crisis, we need to adhere to medical ethic principles even more than we normally do. Because if we don't, we are going to lose our way. And this was what we saw during all aspects of the pandemic from March 2020 onwards. We saw the introduction of a novel technology, injection, being sold as a vaccine after just a 2-month trial period, being injected to about half the world's population, and in many countries it was mandated, and people were told, you can't keep your job, you can't go to work, you can't travel unless you have this injection. And at no point was consent informed. People were coerced, and much harm has been done. And we can see that if we understand the mechanistic process of this product, and we look to our data now, 4 years on. And I think the saddest thing for me as a doctor and a medical practitioner was seeing the breakdown of medical ethics, and consequently a destruction of the sacred doctor-patient relationship that cannot exist without working within that ethical framework.
The last 4 or 5 years have been the most incredible journey of my life, really. So prior to that, I was very trusting, and I believed a lot of the things that I was taught at medical school, a lot of things that I was taught in society, and I lived my life by those standards and beliefs, really. And then along came COVID, and the first few things that happened, a few red flags started to sort of become obvious to me. Things like closing the GP surgeries. I was like, we should be opening them for longer, because not only have GPs got all the patients they normally see, but now they've got these additionally sick patients with COVID. So why on earth would you close the surgeries? And what was going to happen to all the poor cancer patients, depressed people who had other conditions? You know, it's just very obvious that was the wrong thing to do. Secondly, being told that there was no treatment was completely wrong. And by the spring of 2020, I worked out how to treat acute COVID, and it was all things that people could buy over the counter. And so I wrote to various healthcare organisations within the UK, such as the Minister for Health, etc., expecting them to get back to me and saying that's very interesting, and nobody got back to me. So that was another red flag. And then there were people who were basically told to wait until you're really sick and then call an ambulance. And whereas the patients I saw were actually getting better within 24 hours of starting the treatment, sometimes even faster than that. So that was very, odd that I was at odds with the official recommendations. And then the fact that they were telling everyone to lock down, and you never quarantine well people, you only quarantine sick people in medicine. And so why were they telling healthy people to stay home, to ruin the economy? I'm not an economist, but anyone could see that that was going to ruin people's lives and their ability to have a normal life, for children to be educated and university students to enjoy university and so on. And it seemed like it was just destroying everything. So it seemed very immoral, unscientific, and totally unnecessary to me.
I think that each one of us sees it in the battle that we fight in a different way, depending on our experiences, I think through COVID and through our lives itself. The battle that we've been fighting for the past 4 years is to get the world to understand that there was always treatment for COVID. COVID was never that illness that would take people's lives. There was a lot of fear and confusion sown in the general public, and I think there was an agenda to that fear. To make irrational thoughts. It was all in an effort to force a vaccine onto the population, so our freedoms were curbed and that kind of thing. So I think for many, the journey is about the loss of our freedom and the loss of our choice, freedom of choice, informed consent, all the things that revolve around medicine.
The fact is, we want medical doctors to think critically again. Something that was lost in the last years and absolutely lost during the pandemic. And the results are easy to be found. And they should gain their right to think, their skill to think critically and to behave accordingly, because that's what is expected from the doctors. Doctors nowadays, all over the world, have lost the trust of the patients. And they complain about that. Well, it's all their fault, because they did nothing. Because either by omission or by action, they have failed their patients. So how can you possibly trust on somebody who betrayed you, who didn't do anything for your health, for your family, for your beloved ones? And I hope they will have the dignity of accepting their mistakes, of conceding they were wrong, they acted wrong, even when they didn't do anything, and to make a fresh start from now on, and not to be part of a fraud any longer.
I'm Hanneke van Zyl-Edeling. I'm a counseling psychologist and I live in Joburg. The last 4 years have been incredibly challenging because everything that we need for human mental well-being was taken away from us. We know from research that the things that contribute to positive living and to longevity and so are things like community, connecting with people, touching, doing exercise, being able to move about freely. And all of those things were curtailed. So people's stress levels went up enormously and haven't come down yet. We are now kind of seeing waves of influence of what's been happening, particularly from the lockdown. Also with the loss of loved ones, the guilt of not being able to be with them when they were ill or dying. So it's been a really terrible time. And I kind of think, we said that we were never going to let the Holocaust happen again. And I think this is much worse. This is on a global scale and people have been terrorized and frightened into submission. So it's been one of the most traumatic times emotionally for people that I can think of.
It's been quite painful. There was a period of time for 3 months I couldn't sleep at all for 3 months because I was so horrified, basically, with what was going on and what we were living in and the world as it really was, not the world that I thought it was. And then I had this incredible sense of trying to protect people. I've always wanted to protect people, protect my patients, protect my family. And so now I sort of feel that that's a very important thing to do. We had to reconstruct ourselves, our belief systems, everything. And also what happened was so disruptive in family life, in society. You know, people became us and them in so many different areas. It was like, what is happening? It was just so foreign, so odd and pathological, you know, splitting families, who, you know, people who believed in the vaccine, for example, those who didn't, you know, being told the vaccine was safe and effective when it was neither, and there was no safety data, being told you had to do something against your body autonomy and your sovereignty. That was wrong. A lot of morals and ethics went out the window, so that was another red flag. And just, yeah, the whole thing of forcing people, and also the science behind it didn't make sense. You know, no one is protected until everyone is protected. Excuse me, if something protects somebody, they don't care whether anyone else has had it or not, because they've got the immunity from it and they're fine. But it's how they managed to make people believe that other people who didn't have the vaccine were somehow evil, bad people. That was just extraordinary. You know, if you had the BCG, for example, to protect you against TB, you shouldn't care whether you sit in a train full of people with TB because you're not going to catch it. And suddenly, everyone had to have the vaccine. It was very strange. The whole thing was just like everything I believed was a lie.
The content of what we spoke about, apart from these principles I've said of science and ethics, has been regenerative healing using natural knowledge. And there is a tremendous amount of natural knowledge and resources in Africa that can achieve healing and health without artificial chemical substances. Now, we are not against the use of artificial chemical substances when they're necessary, but we prefer to eat right and live right and behave right, and then need to use less pharmaceutical products. And we had presentations by truly scientific and ethical healthcare practitioners who have shown us how they've saved people's lives and livelihoods by going to the root of their health problem and regenerating their health.
My name is Honourable Kudam Pamanga. I'm the Member of Parliament for Mount Darwin South, as well as the Deputy Minister for Youth Empowerment, Development and Vocational Training for the government of Zimbabwe. We had a global health pandemic, but at the end of it, we had very few mortality rates compared to the rest of the world. And I think a big part of it here in Zimbabwe was the fact that people turned back to traditional medicines that they knew were useful for things like colds and flus.
My name is Junior Mafu. I work for the Cancer Association of Zimbabwe. So we were invited by Dr. Jackie Stone to come and attend this healing summit, which was a great honor. I think going back to the basics is something Africa can teach the world over. We then realized that our herbs, the natural foods that we were growing in our communal lands were the ones that were benefiting us health-wise. I think as Zimbabwe, we've got a wealth of knowledge in terms of natural herbs, organic food that the world over can tap in and learn from us. We've got qualified professionals in this field that also can contribute.
I've never visited Africa before, and as a Westerner, I had a vision of what it might look like. And I've learned so much from coming here, from Africa's communities, which have not been touched by westernization. And so we can look to those communities for a traditional way of life that has held on to specifically good food, the importance of community connection and movement. And we see a happy, vibrant population which is not suffering from obesity and metabolic disease as we are in Western countries. And there is so many lessons to learn from that. And I think the way forward for humanity is to relearn those lessons.
Having some of these realizations has made me look to different sources of information and has connected me to different doctors who feel similarly, and then different people who feel similarly. And then you start to really find your tribe, really, and that was super important, because on your own it's very isolating and it's very lonely. But if you can connect in with some like-minded people, that's terribly important, and it gives you incredible courage and power. And I sort of believe that we're all put here for a reason, and I think that my reason is to do this.
My name is Dr. Ivan Jardine. I'm an ear, nose and throat surgeon. I've been practicing for over 3 decades now in private practice at the Bedford Gardens Hospital in Johannesburg. I recently attended the Healing in Africa conference in Zimbabwe at the Vic Falls, and I came away full of hope, and I'm trying to explore things further now to see if I can formulate something for my colleagues and to treat other patients and give them hope that at least we can detox from the vaccine, we can boost the immune system so they can feel better. How it will pan out in long run, I don't know, because if it's right in your cells and you're changing your DNA, I don't know how we can reverse that. But certainly there are ways of boosting the immune system. There are ways of breaking down the spike proteins. And to me, I think at least that's a glimmer of hope for patients. And if most of the symptoms are caused by the spike proteins that are causing damage to the endothelium in our blood vessels, and that's irritating and causing clots to happen and things like that. So if we can decrease the amount of spike protein in the body, then the incidence of those complications should decrease. And that's what we want to see.
Anything that happened with all its iniquity, inequality, suffering will surely happen again if we don't go back to the Hippocratic Oath, and if we don't take care and we don't adjust our procedures and our behavior to the Nuremberg Code, to the Helsinki protocols. If we don't do that, we are doomed as a society. And nobody seems to be going in that direction. That's why we are here, trying to call for the common sense of the other colleagues in order to return to traditional medicine. We have to put all these medicines together because they are not alternative. Alternative is a very bad definition because it seems to underrate what they are. But they are all different medicines that could work nicely together if we consider that the only thing we must have in common, the only important thing, is the patient. So that's what we are trying to do. It's a difficult task. We will have a hard time, and I'm not sure if I will see it, but the other chance is to do nothing. And we have learned what doing nothing meant to the patients during the pandemic. So we must do something, what we consider the best in the situation we are. But to do nothing is unforgivable.
If we have got strategies to help these people, then that's fantastic. It's going to be loads of work. I haven't got time to retire. It's too much to do.
It's very pertinent to be at a conference in Africa, Africa being the cradle of civilization. And now we have a new opportunity to start afresh. Africa has shown us that nature is the grounding for everything.
If it can be, as we think it should be, the inaugural meeting of like-minded people who are thinking that we really need to rethink medicine, perhaps if we have to start afresh, if we have to reteach, if we have to research, I'm very much prepared. And if it can be the inaugural one, and it's happening here in Victoria Falls, in Zimbabwe, I think I'll also be the proudest Zimbabwean, and I'm ready for it.
Going away from this conference, we are tightly knit, we are on the same path, we know where we're going. We will carry on developing vehicles. We will develop new solutions that hopefully give an alternative to the normal person on the street to get back to a trusted healthcare environment.
Mankind was originated in Africa, and Africa keeps being the fortress everybody wanted. Why? Africa seemed to be untouched by the pandemic. It's easy to discover that.